I'm Lee Eskin. This is my mother, Marcia, and my father, Barney. The program you are about to see was named in honor of my brother, Jonah Salkoff Eskin, who died by suicide at the age of 15. We wanted to tell you a bit about him and the reason we have established this program in his memory. Jonah had many passions. His keen observance of wildlife demonstrated his love of nature. Learning to play the piano, oboe, and clarinet expressed his love of music, and his love of reading inspired his appreciation of libraries. At age 10, Jonah wrote, "If I could, I would read and do nothing else." Jonah was intelligent, perceptive, and empathic. He felt deeply about friends and family, nature and wildlife, really all living things. Jonah wished for harmony among people of different orientations, faiths, races, economic backgrounds, all coexisting and learning together. When he was 14, he wrote, "A peaceful world is very important to me." But Jonah, like everyone, had his flaws. A good student, he was also a procrastinator. Somewhat of a geek, he was miserable at sports. Close with and fiercely loyal to his small group of friends, he was also socially awkward. Being in some ways different, Jonah was sometimes the target of bullying. He struggled to comprehend why people had so little regard for the feelings of others. A quiet kid, he kept his inner thoughts almost invisible. At the same time, he was unable to detach himself from the suffering he experienced and observed. This is illustrated in excerpts of a poem a friend wrote shortly after his death. Jonah's mind was hungry to think and learn and grow, and he was always seeking new, exciting things to know. "A penny for your thoughts, my friend," we all would sometimes cry. But what went through his head, $1,000,000 couldn't buy. In life, he chose the solo route, and that should bring no shame. But still, if he had spoken more, would it have been the same? And as I think about it, there may be a message there. Don't hold back what you're feeling from those who truly care. When you lose a loved one, regardless of the circumstance, one way to keep them in your imagination is to do something that honors their spirit. Only after many years were we able to process the pain of our loss enough to establish a tribute. But of course, that pain also never fully goes away. We sponsor these programs in Jonah's memory through the Library of Congress. Libraries, holding a special place in his heart, fostered his love of reading and learning. They are also one of the few places where everyone is on equal footing, where no one is excluded. The Talk, the book featured in today's program, captures frank discussions about racism, identity, and self-esteem. It's a starting point for building a world where each individual is treated with dignity and respect. This would have resonated strongly with Jonah, who believed, as one of the authors says, everyone's story deserves to be told. Jonah yearned for a world where everyone can feel safe, where love and respect for all living things are the guiding principles by which we live. In Jonah's words, peace was a simple necessity. Perhaps at times, he was made to feel less than, and it disturbed him when others were made to feel that way. We can all do better recognizing the intrinsic value of each individual, including in ourselves. Even in the most difficult times, intense feelings do pass, and there are people who care and who want to help. We are all confronted with that ongoing challenge to lift each other up, and we are thankful that the library helps us to continue to do that through honoring Jonah's memory, through reading, education, and excellent, thoughtful books like The Talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee, for the lovely message. It's an honor to be able to work with you together and help Jonah's memory live on. My name is Sasha Dowdy, and I work in the Library of Congress Center for Learning, Literacy, and Engagement. I get to work with kids and teens at my job, and I'm happy to be here with all of you today. Welcome to Talking About Race, Love, and Truth with authors Adam Gidwitz and Renee Watson. This program is part one of the Jonah Salkoff Eskin Memorial Program. For this program, we have questions pre-recorded from high school students from DC and Maryland. Before we get into it, let's get to know the authors here with us today. Renee Watson is a New York Times bestselling author. Her picture books and novels for teens have received several awards and international recognition. She has given readings and lectures at many renowned venues, including the United Nations, Library of Congress, and the U.S. Embassy in Japan. Her poetry and fiction often center on the experiences of Black girls and women and explore themes of home, identity, and the intersections of race, class, and gender. Adam Goodwitz is the author of the critically acclaimed New York Times bestselling Grimm trilogy. He spent 6 years researching and writing his Newbery Honor-winning novel, The Inquisitor's Tale, including a year living in Europe. And Adam lives with his family in Brooklyn, New York. Welcome, Adam and Renee. It's a pleasure to have you here with us today.
Thanks so much for having us.
Very glad to be here.
So before we get into our questions from high school students, could you please tell us about the story that you have contributed to the talk?
Sure. So I will go first. I wrote an open letter to Black girls. And I was thinking about the talk that so many Black families have with their children about who to be in the world and how to exist in a world that isn't always so kind to you and isn't always loving towards Black girls. And so I thought about the things my mother told me, the things that I'm now saying to my niece and the young girls that I mentor. So the letter is a letter of solidarity. It's a letter of advice, hopefully of encouragement and inspiration, and just a moment to say, you know, what you're experiencing is valid. I think sometimes we can think that we're the only ones going through something, or that is, we can feel very isolated in the way that we are being treated in the world. And so I think it's powerful, even if nothing changes, just to know that other people are going through the same thing and other people see you. So it was my way of saying to young Black girls, I see you and what's happening to you is real, and I love you, and you will survive because so many other Black women have survived. So that's what the letter is about.
And it's a wonderful piece. My piece is called Our Inheritance, and it's an imagined conversation between me and my daughter a few years in the future. And it's about my family history. My great-grandfather came to this country as the first Gidwitz in this country. He was a Jewish immigrant. And I always learned his story as this heroic story. He was like a Moses figure to me, coming to this country and making a place for our family. And he did very well, and he set up his sons to do even better. And a lot of the way I get to live, including the choice that I made to be an author, which involved quitting my job and taking enormous financial risks, all of that was enabled by him. And so I tell that story, but what I had not realized, and I only discovered a few years ago in reading his memoir, that his success was predicated in part by dispossessing and exploiting Black families who were sharecroppers. He bought plantation land in Mississippi in the 1890s, I think. And so what I'm trying to do in that piece is tell the story of how even the immigrant story in this country, the Jewish immigrant or the white immigrant, he experienced plenty of discrimination as a Jewish man with a heavy accent from Lithuania. But he was able to jump onto the system of Black exploitation of Black people in this country and make a lot of money doing that. And that the way I live today, my career, even the house that I live in and the neighborhood I live in, a lot of that would not have been possible had he not been able to join in the racist system that exists in this country, existed back then, and still exists to this day. So part of the point of my piece is to show the way that even as I'm a very well-meaning white person, but even as a well-meaning white person, I have benefited from and continue to benefit from these systems of racism. And therefore, it's part of my responsibility to help people of color leading the charge in taking those systems apart.
Thank you for sharing those summaries. Those are both really powerful pieces. So our first question today is from Luca, and he is a high school student in DC. And his question is to both authors.
If there was any one thing you would want your audience or your readers to take away from your short stories, what would it be? And would it differ among readers of different racial identities, cultural backgrounds, or even ages? Thanks.
So I think that when I'm writing, I don't necessarily, this is one of the only things that I entered into saying, I really want Black girls to feel, XYZ. Most of the time when I write, I just let a story take its own form and hopefully the reader connects with it. But I really, like I said, I want Black girls to feel seen and to feel validated and to be inspired and encouraged. The letter mentioned some ancestors and activists and artists who have kind of paved the way and left a record of how to survive this world and how to still love yourself in a world that doesn't always love you. And so I hope that they really do go look up those poets and activists that I name and learn about them and find strength from their stories. And even if you aren't a Black girl, you could learn from those women that I mentioned and find strength from their stories, right? So I don't think it differs. What I want people to take away is that all of our stories matter, and that if you aren't a Black girl, hopefully you can walk away from the story or the letter thinking, how can I be a better ally to Black girls? How can I really see them? How can I stand up for them? How can I not stereotype them, right? So yeah, I think different readers will have different takeaways, but I hope that everyone takes away this idea that racism is something we have inherited, and we have lessons that can be learned from the past in order to make our future better. And so I hope that young people especially look to our elders and our ancestors and learn how we can move forward and heal and actually love each other.
Thank you. I love that you bring up where we all come from and the ancestors who come before us, because I, as a person who works at the Library of Congress, immediately had to go in our collections and see what we have about the women that you mentioned. So I encourage everybody to read the story and then go to loc.gov to do a little bit more research, read more stories.
Yeah, can I add that I think that of anything I write, whether it's fiction, nonfiction, I really hope that readers walk away with questions and that they're curious and want to go do their own investigating and their own learning after they read something that I've put out in the world. So yeah, I do hope that everybody, no matter where you come from and who you are, that it makes you ask more questions and that you try to go find the answers to those questions. And some questions will feel that you cannot find an answer. It's such a big question. You might not have an answer, but there will be other things where you can find some answers. And so I think with all my work, I hope that young people are curious and that they want to investigate their world.
It doesn't end with the last page. I love that. Adam, please.
Yeah, what I hope that my readers take away from it is actually just what Renee just said, that the desire, the drive to go investigate more. So just like I described, I didn't know all of the aspects of my family history, and I had not thought about the ramifications of the way that I live and how it comes out of what Renee just beautifully described as racism as our inheritance. And so certainly for white kids, but really for every kid, I would love them to read it and think, where did I come from? And how did I get to this place? And what did my family have to do to get me here? What our families had to do to get us to where we are now were wildly different, very different. My family, might have been living in Mississippi, a quarter mile or less from a Black family who was having to go through a very different thing. But both of our families did a lot to get us here. And they both had to interact with systems of racism in very different ways. And it wasn't always simple, right? My family did some serious exploitation of Black people, and they also suffered racism at the same time, right? Those complicated stories, I think we all need to learn, because if we start to learn those stories, then we understand the complexity of our world that we live in. And only when we really start to understand the complexity of our world can we start to fix our world. So that's what I hope for.
Miss Watson, I first wanted to thank you for your beautiful and empowering story. I loved the messages about courage, expression, integrity, and determination. When I was reading your story, I sometimes felt that I was listening in on a conversation not intended for me. Both Luca and I came away wondering the same thing. What message can every reader take away from your passage?
You know, I do think that in some ways you were listening in on a conversation that is not necessarily for you. And that is called bearing witness. Like, you got to bear witness to me talking to Black girls. And if you don't identify as a Black girl, then you were watching this moment happen, reading this moment happening between two Black women. And you get to bear witness and take in that story. And I think as a reader, it then becomes your responsibility to say, what am I going to do with this new information? How is this information going to reshape or help me rethink what I've been thinking about racism, Black girls? What have I not even noticed or thought about that was brought up in this letter to Black girls? So I think it's okay to maybe not fully identify with what someone is writing or saying, but to still be able to say, in solidarity, I stand with these people. I'm an ally with this group, and I want to learn more. So that's one thing I would say. And then, you know, I think because stories humanize us, we can always connect to someone else's story, right? So I do think that the advice about learning when to speak up for yourself and learning how to also take breaks and rest and being okay with all the emotions that you feel, being angry, being sad, and not trying to deny those feelings when they really are there. All of that applies to all of us, right? And I think especially young girls are sometimes taught to push our emotions down. So I think in some ways, yes, I'm talking to Black girls. I'm also talking to girls about asserting yourself and owning how you feel. So I think there are ways that you can look at the piece and say, oh, I completely get that part and I identify with that, and I can take that and apply it to my own life. And there might be some things where you're like, wow, I have never had to think about that, or I've never had to feel that. And then just sit with that and be okay with sometimes somebody's story is really just their story, and that's okay. And sometimes somebody's story is going to be a bridge for you to connect with them, and that's okay too. And hopefully both things are happening at the same time, and you can accept that and feel fine with being kind of eavesdropping in, which we allowed you to, right? It's published in a book. So we wanted people who maybe didn't identify with that group to also feel what it's like to be in those shoes. And then, yeah, of course, join in where you can fit in and unite and say, yeah, I stand with you. And I sometimes feel the same way.
Could I just support what Renee is saying by saying that there is many opportunities these days, thanks to the work of writers like Renee and the Hudsons and all of the incredible people who put together and participated in the talk. There are many invitations into these conversations that we, who wouldn't necessarily be privy to them, get to listen in. We've been invited in, and it's a real privilege. I had an experience, this is not a written conversation, but I spent a lot of time traveling in Texas to talk about my books, and I was in Laredo on the border with Mexico, right on the border. And one Friday afternoon, one of the students was like, hey, my grandparents are having a carne asada this weekend. I know you're going to be in town. Would you like to join us? And I asked the librarian, can I do this? She said, you got invited to a carne asada? You better not say no. So I went. And it was incredible. We had this beautiful, it was a cookout, a barbecue, and I got to spend time with their very large, extended Mexican-American family. And I got to witness and be an observer and be included to some degree, and also come away with it, from it, having seen beautiful and complex and interesting things that I wouldn't have had a chance to. I felt the same way when I recently read Love is a Revolution, Renee Watson's new book. when you're sitting in the senior center, which is one of the places where the book takes place, and you're hearing a conversation among older, I think mostly African American elders in this senior center in Harlem, you are gaining wisdom and insight and kind of beauty that I'm not usually invited to see. So when you see a piece and you wonder, like, is that for me? Well, it was published, so you have been invited to learn from that and to grow from it. So rather than say, like, should I read it? The answer is you should say thank you for having a chance to read it, and you will get better from it. Especially Love is a Revolution. Bye.
Thank you, Adam.
Yeah, it's true, though. True.
Yeah, it really is a privilege to be invited into any of these conversations. So thank you. And Renee, you are always so uplifting to all kinds of people who read your stories. So just
Thank you.
always good to hear what you have to say. Thank you. That was beautiful. I have a question now for both authors, and here's what Adeline says.
How would you change your approach to discussing racism when discussing it with people of different backgrounds?
So my approach is the same. I think what I say might be different. So meaning my approach is to ask questions and not assume, and to do more listening than talking, because all of our experiences are different. So even when I'm talking to a Black girl and we are, maybe talking about what's happening in the news, I'm not going to assume that she's feeling any kind of way, because maybe she's not thinking the same thing I'm thinking. She might not be as angry as I am, or as sad, or, so I just always want to enter a conversation open to really listening to what people have to say and meeting them where they are. So I kind of try to take that when I'm talking to anyone, and just my approach is to not assume that even that a white person is coming into the conversation with, whatever my assumptions and stereotypes could be. So I'm trying to just enter the conversation, wanting to listen, and hopefully with generosity. And then I think what I say depends on what they say, right? And so sometimes I am giving more comforting words and more like, I understand, I've been there, I see you, I get that makes sense. And other times I'm pushing, and I'm asking people to challenge themselves and asking them to see things another way. But I hope that with both whoever I'm talking to, that I'm coming at it with compassion and love and patience, because I know that a lot of times these conversations don't happen. And for me as an author, going into classrooms, talking to educators and young people, sometimes that is the first really blunt, real conversation they are having, because our culture so much doesn't want to name things and so much wants to act like nothing is happening, even when it is so very clear what is going on. And so sometimes it takes a moment for people to actually open up. Like I come open and say, okay, we're going to talk about this. And sometimes I have to practice a lot of patience. And help people get there where they are actually being honest about what they're seeing and feeling and thinking, because sometimes people just are never really told you can have this conversation and you can be honest. And so I try to offer that so that we can really go there and not pretend like we're not all feeling the things that we're feeling. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes. I would start, I want to start with the same place that Renee starts, with generosity and with listening. That is crucial and fundamental. And then for me, I'll be honest, first of all, I feel like a baby in this process. This is something that Renee has been forced to deal with for your whole life, I would imagine, one way or another. And I have only gotten to start dealing with it in the last few years, especially through the advocacy work that's been done in the children's literature community. I think really before we need diverse books, which I started in 2016, 2015, around that.
2015.
Yeah. So I was published in 2010. For those first 5 years, I was aware of social issues of racism because I grew up in Baltimore. I was very, closely witnessing those things, but I didn't have to speak to them. I could think about it. I could talk to it with my friends. I have a close friend who's a civil rights lawyer. We would talk about it in private. but I didn't have to go out and represent or discuss these issues in a way that other authors and other public figures had to and still have to. So first thing to say is I'm a baby on it. I'm very much learning, and that's for me the most important thing. And then I do speak very differently when I am speaking to a person of color or when I'm speaking to a white person. And if I'm speaking to a white Jewish person, I feel even slightly different because I am white and Jewish. With people of color, I listen. I listen, I affirm, and even if I don't understand or initially disagree, I just try to listen harder, maybe ask a clarifying question, but pretty much just listen harder, because if what they're describing doesn't accord with my experience, my response should not be, oh, that's not right, or that's not how it is. That should not be my response. My response should be, well, I don't experience it that way. I wonder why. Maybe I experience the world differently than you do because of the privileges I have, because I'm a man in various settings, a white man, a Jewish man. So first thing, I listen with people of color, BIPOC people. And then with white people, and especially with white Jewish people, I generally feel more comfortable sharing the story that I wrote in the talk or a related story about the ways that I have benefited. There are a lot of white people who reject the idea of privilege. They say, well, I'm not rich, or I didn't get into the school I wanted to get into, so I don't have privilege. I didn't get into the schools I wanted to get into either, by the way. I have plenty of privilege. And so helping show the ways that I have experienced that privilege as a way for them to have something to hook onto and say, like, oh, actually, I connect with that, or that does feel like my experience. That's been my approach. I'm not sure it's the right one. But that has been the approach that I've been using to try to make people sit back and say, okay, actually, I see how I am participating in ongoing systems of racism that hurt people of color, even right now, even though I don't want to. So that's usually my approach.
Yeah. What we don't often think about as a white person, I'm saying this, is that how much work it is to talk about race, and how hard it is, and we can choose to talk about it and take on that labor. And so many people don't have that choice.
It's the truth. I've been feeling just this week, I've been thinking, since the shooting in Atlanta, I've been, doing a lot of reading, and I feel like I'm sort of back to that place where I was this summer in the wake of George Floyd, where it's building on me, and it feels exhausting, and I feel sad, and I feel tired. And to think that I feel sad and tired after like 1 week of reading about it a lot recently, the amount of effort and labor that people who don't get to choose to come into the conversation and leave the conversation have to exert, just makes me feel all the more empathic for and grateful for the work that people like Renee and the Hudsons and the other contributors to the talk are doing and continue to do to make our society better, so that we all get to live in a better society. So I'm grateful for all that labor.
Adam, just to ask for a definition, you mentioned BIPOC earlier, and for the people who are viewing who don't know that term, could you please explain?
Yeah, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So it's another way of saying people of color. Renee, maybe you want to go into it more, but I think historically, Black people and Indigenous people in the United States have been singled out and expressly oppressed and exploited in this nation because of our history. And so BIPOC is a term that is mostly synonymous with people of color, but what highlights the history of Black and Indigenous people in this society.
Mm-hmm. I don't have anything to add. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. So our next question is from Vivian.
Mr. Gidwitz, I appreciated your honesty about your history in Our Inheritance, and I can imagine it was difficult for you to bring that to light. For white people whose ancestors were slave owners or complicit in a racist system, there can be a sense of shame about that history and a desire to cover it up. How do you suggest people should deal with the variety of emotions that arise in the reality of their racist history?
That's a wonderful question, Vivian. That's a wonderful question. How should we deal with the emotions? I guess the only answer that I have, see, I've been going after Renee so that she's been getting to give me time to think and say all the smart things, and I can just piggyback on what she said. Now I have to go first. It's much harder. I would say that for me, the emotion that is required is courage, right? Mm-hmm. I'm going to be okay. I can talk about these things and really I'm fine. And some people might give me a little clap because I'm being a good person and talking about these difficult things, a little pat on the back. And some people might say, you shouldn't talk about this, or you're talking about it wrong. And no matter what people say, I'm going to be fine. So I need to have the courage to talk about the truth, right? We care about the truth. I hope you care about the truth. I certainly care about the truth. And I want our society to be a better place where we can all feel free, where we can all feel loved, where we can all feel like we have the opportunity to achieve our potential. That's what America is supposed to be about. And so if I want America to be what it promises to be, then I have to have like a modicum of courage, just a tiny bit, in order to investigate, to learn the truth, and then just to talk about it and know that no matter what I say, I am going to be okay. And if I say something really awful, really wrong, and I say this to white people, I say to white authors a lot, the most important thing to do is to just say, oh, if somebody calls you out on it, you say, oh, that's a really good point. I hadn't thought about that. Let me go think about that. Let me learn, and I will come back wiser and better. Thank you for that critique. I'm going to be fine. So we will feel plenty of other emotions: sadness, shame, guilt, anxiety. You know what? The world is a complicated and difficult place, and people of color, BIPOC folks have a lot of those emotions, a lot more of them. So don't be afraid of emotions. Just bring some courage with them and have the flexibility to know that if you make a mistake, all you have to do after that mistake is apologize and learn from it and try to get better.
I have a follow-up question to this because I imagine sharing my family story, and they're like a lot of kids probably watching are a little bit closed ranks, right? So how would you share the story of your ancestors if your parents tell you not to? And you might end up making your parents mad or upset that you shared this less than pleasant history publicly.
I mean, I don't know. I think you can talk to your friends, and then ultimately when you're an adult, if you have the chance to talk publicly about it, you have to make your own choices in your life. I think we've seen over the course of the history in this country, a lot of parents telling children not to do certain things, and children knowing what the right thing to do was and doing it anyway. So you look in your heart and you'll figure out what the right thing to do is. Sometimes it's to speak, and sometimes it's to listen. But just because your parents tell you not to do it, y'all, you know better than
that. Adam said it.
I'll be apologizing for that one later.
Can I add? I think it's interesting because even in a lot of Black families, we are also told what happens in this house stays in this house, and we don't need to air our dirty laundry, or there are some conversations that should just be for our community and not for everyone. So I think there is a lot of fear sometimes that adults have about young people being able to handle things or have these conversations, and what could come of it if you really share the truth about either how you feel or about what you've done or what your past is, what the legacy is that maybe isn't so great. And I would just encourage young people. So there is one part about owning your story, right? And I'm a big, I'm always saying, tell your story, share your story. But I also think more importantly, like it's not just kind of taking the mic and telling your story. It's also just, who do you want to be in this world? Like knowing where you come from isn't just so that you can write a poem about it. It's so that you can do something with that knowledge and use it to make yourself a better person. So I would encourage people who feel like, well, maybe you can't tell the details of your actual family's history. Okay, but how is your family history going to impact the way you show up in the world today? And how are you going to do better by your family for your children and for the life that you want to live? So I think You might not be able to say the actual things that have happened right now because you're young. And there might be a time for you to do that. But I think the other question is, what do you do with the information that you're learning? And how do you move forward in a way that will, if you need to, if you're thinking, man, I really need to shift things and take a turn and make sure that this is not passed on to the next generation after me, how do you move forward knowing the things that you know about the past? I think that's the question we all can be asking ourselves.
Amen.
Yeah, a lot of work happening inside.
Yes, lots of work. always lots of work. It is a marathon, right? Not a sprint, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yes. It's like a long distance hike, because you know what? In a marathon, you have to keep running, but on a hike, you take a nap, you put up a tent. Sometimes you have to go back a little bit and then you go forward.
Yes.
It is a long distance trek.
And it's good if you have friends hiking with you too.
It is.
Yes. Amen.
It is.
That's kind of what I was trying to allude to earlier when thinking about, especially for white folks who you learn your past or you know something and then you want to go tell that story, right? It's in some ways, not of course not always, but I think sometimes that in and of itself is still focusing on the white person. Mm-hmm. So it is important to listen and to let other people speak, and also to think about the everydayness. Like, how can we fight against racism in small, which really nothing is small if you're fighting against racism, but I mean in ways that maybe are not informative, and maybe no one's going to know that you did that. Maybe you're not going to get the applause because it's not public, but in your everyday life, you are learning and also doing something with what you've learned with your neighbors, with your family, with the people closest to you. It's almost easier to make the big speech or to go out and protest with strangers and do the thing that are, so public. But who are you? And when the joke is said in the classroom and people are laughing, are you going to be the one to kind of step up and say, that is not a funny joke, that's a racist joke? Are you going to be kind to people who are maybe new to your school? And that's the kind of, that's the way we change things. It's not always the person that's more visible and outspoken and loud. Sometimes change is happening in very quiet, subtle ways. And so especially for young people who might even feel like, oh, I'm not an activist, I'm not trying to do all that. It's okay. You don't have to feel like a capital A activist. You can think about it in very small, practical ways. How do I show up as my best self in this world? And how am I going to practice undoing racism in my life in very small, practical, but tangible ways? I think that's something to think about for all of us, but especially for folks who are feeling like maybe nervous or intimidated by all of this, or that you're at the beginning of your learning. Like, that's totally fine. It's okay. I think what I would ask of you is to keep learning and to also give yourself small bite-sized ways of fighting for change.
Yeah, that's really good. And it's like, you might want to run out there and run to the library.
Good place to run to, always.
It's a great place to run to, for sure.
So that's actually all of the questions that we have from students. Thank you for doing so much work answering them. I know they will really appreciate it. They really genuinely wanted to know the answers, so they'll be thrilled.
Thanks so much for this conversation. It's always nice to hear from young people and think of, find out what they're curious about.
Yeah. Grateful for the opportunity to have the conversation with them and with Renee and through the Library of Congress, which is obviously such an incredible institution. So very grateful to be included.
Yeah, we're really an institution that collects people's stories, right? And now your stories live with us, and maybe the stories of those who watch will also come to our institution. It's just a cycle of inspiration, cycle of creativity goes on. And I hope these conversations continue long after this conversation's over. So Renee and Adam, thank you so much for such an illuminating discussion. I learned a lot, and I feel like I'm walking away with more tools to help me do better. And I hope the viewers feel the same way, that they have some tools too. Thank you so much for your time today. We've been discussing the talk, Conversations on Race, Love, and Truth, which is published by Crown Books for Young Readers in partnership with Just Us Books. It's available in bookstores everywhere. Thank you for joining us today.